What would you say then are the three main reasons most relationships fail, don't work out?
Lack of connection, for sure. Feeling like they're distant from each other, but they don't know how to create that same emotional intimacy.
They don't know how to reconnect, or they don't know how to...
Yeah, they don't feel understood. They don't feel seen. They don't feel like... Usually what inspires us to commit to someone in a relationship is that we feel very connected to them.
Why does it leave? How do they get disconnected?
So, the number one reason that I have seen is stress. People not managing the stress in their lives.
They don't have the tools on how to manage or how to regulate their emotions.
Exactly. And how to face the demands of life. And the thing is, you don't have to know how to face every demand of your life. You can be stressed out, but it's the chronic stress. Because when you're chronically stressed, and I've experienced this before myself, and I've seen this in countless people, right? When you don't have the tools to deal with the demands of your life, and maybe some of the demands are huge. Maybe they're not so huge, but it's the way you're seeing them that they're so huge. Then you start to disconnect from yourself. Your nervous system gets completely dysregulated. You don't feel like yourself. And then what happens is that when people are stressed out, it's like they're shut down for business when it comes to their partner. Because if you haven't experienced, I don't know if you have, when you're really stressed, we become obsessed with ourselves. We become obsessed with the problem. We become obsessed with not knowing where there's a way out. And look, sometimes stress is really, really intense and heavy and real and traumatic. But when we're in that, we're not actually connecting with the other person. We're not present with each other.
Yes.
And so of course it's going to happen once in a while, right? We get mindless in our relationships. Sometimes we can be the most conscious, self-aware person, but sometimes we will be just mindless when it comes to the person we love. But yet, if it's over and over again, if it's over weeks, if it's over months, if it's over years, and then all of a sudden you're like, you haven't had sex in months or years, or you haven't truly connected, like you haven't had conversations where you're looking at each other in the eyes, you haven't had the physical and emotional intimacy. And so that is really, and it's like those two people, they would say, yeah, I still love this person.
Right.
And then once it gets really real, then they're like, oh, I don't want to lose this person. I want to go back to the way it was. So I would say that stress and then taking each other for granted would be the second reason why relationships fail. We basically, when we start seeing someone and we're falling in love with them,
we pour into them all this love and appreciation, and we see them and we're grateful.
Yeah, they're a gift, exactly. And then life happens and all of a sudden they become a given.
Right.
And so this person who you once saw as a gift becomes a given, and then people feel totally taken for granted. And that leads me to number 3, which is resentment. People don't have the difficult conversations. They feel unseen. They feel unheard. And then you take someone, for example, who hasn't learned, for various reasons, how to assert themselves, how to say what it is that they need, how to have the difficult conversations, how to have the courage enough to dare to rock the boat of the relationship.
And create boundaries or whatever it might be.
Or create bridges. It might be a boundary that leads to a bridge. The whole point of a boundary is so that there's more connection, not less.
Right.
So then they stew in their own resentment, and it becomes like bloody hell for the person. It becomes like contempt, and then all of a sudden you're looking at that person and you're like, I hate them. They love them, but you're like, I hate them. And so it's the stress, it's the taking people for granted and the resentment. And the stress, I think, is the bigger umbrella under which all the rest rests.
Do you feel like people should even enter into a committed long-term relationship if they haven't yet figured out the tools for managing stress in their own life?
No, I think that they can, but they can learn the tools while they're in a relationship.
But if they don't learn the tools in
It's
the relationship, then what?
then it's going to be a problem. I mean, so let's just say someone doesn't know how to manage their stress, just their day-to-day stuff, right? Like everything is a big deal, or they're freaking out over money, they're freaking out over this or that, and they come home and they're just always on their phone dealing with their stress. And then their partner's like, well, what about me, right?
Right.
You know, and then it gets really tiring. It's like, well, what about me? And then partner B will say, will try to like, maybe like if they're super codependent, like overcompensate, like, let me help this person with their stress. Let me heal them, because that wanting to heal their partner of their stress is just so they can get their partner back.
Back to peace, back to a place of like, hey, we're together.
Yeah, we're together. Like, you know, like you love me again. You're looking at me again. I matter again.
Yeah, so stress, what I'm hearing you say, based on all the conversations, the coaching that you've done with people, if people can learn to minimize their stress or navigate their stress in a healthier way,
Yeah.
then they can get back to being there with their partner in moments that matter.
Yes.
And showing them the affection, the attention, or the presence that your partner needs.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you have to be perfect every day, but it's like you're consistent in that attention.
Yes, exactly. Because what happens when we're really stressed is that we get in our heads and we ruminate and we obsess.
Analyze.
I mean, you know, I've been the queen of that, so I can speak very confidently about that, you know, and most people just, it's hard not to live in your head. One needs consistent daily practices to not live in your head. Now, some people have a natural proclivity to really go with the flow of life more, but I see that way less than I see people who live in their heads. And so let's say you have one or two people and they're in a relationship and they're always in their heads. They're not connecting.
With the other.
Yeah, they're not connecting with the other, exactly. And so that really is the cause of so many relationships ending that not enough people talk about.
Is that like a personality type thing to be aware of? Like understanding when you're meeting someone, are they an analytical person who's always in their head? If so, just because they're charismatic in one way or just because they're talented here or because they have status, doesn't mean it's going to be a great relationship long term.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people, I struggle to put people in too many boxes because I've also known people who can be incredibly neurotic and analytical and in their heads and brilliant that way, but somehow they just make their lover feel like $1 million. And yes, maybe sometimes they get too in their head, but they're really responsive to their partner's feedback when they're like, you've been too in your head, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna wake up.
Right.
Because we're not perfect.
But then you gotta find someone who's responsive to feedback.
And that's actually
And receptive to it.
And that's the more important skill. Not never be on, you have to have daily practices to deal with your stress, but life happens. But to be responsive to feedback, I feel like that's really one of the most underrated relationship skills.
Thank you for watching this video. If you want more inspiring clips like this, make sure to click right here to subscribe and click right here to watch that next video that is specific to support you in your life.